Now we're going to talk about finding volume for cones, cylinders, and spheres. By the end of this lesson, the objective is I can solve problems using volume formulas for a cone, cylinder, and a sphere. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that I know we're switching gears. We were doing the Pythagorean Theorem, but now we have to talk about volume. And really, all you need to know about volume is that you can plug the right information into the volume formula to solve a volume problem. Here's some vocabulary. A cone, okay? A cone has a circular base and then comes to a point at the top. Traffic cones are a good real-life example of that, okay? A cylinder has a circle for a base on both ends. That's the difference between a cylinder and a cone. A cylinder has two circle bases and a cone has one. A sphere is a three-dimensional ball, okay, that's circular. All right, so what is volume? Volume is the amount of space inside a three-dimensional object. The objects we're using now are circular in some ways, and so they're a little bit different, but they're still measured using cubes because that's what volume is measured by. It's using cubes to fill the inside of a three-dimensional shape. So let's talk about the first volume formula, the volume of a cylinder, okay? The formula for the volume of a cylinder is pi r squared times h. So pi times radius squared times h. Well, the first thing you have to do is find the radius. Let me remind you that the radius is half of the circle, okay? Half of the circle. So all we're going to do is plug the information we know into the formula. So let's look at this first one. Number 1, okay? Pi times radius squared times height. So pi, we're going to use 3.14. We're going to use radius squared. Our radius, or halfway across, is 22 squared. And our height is 35 squared. Or 35, sorry. Woo. Now, we're just going to use our order of operations. The first thing we do is square our exponent. So 3.14 times 484 times 35. Now we're just going to multiply from left to right. 3.14 times 484 is 1,519 and 76 hundredths times 35. Now we're going to multiply our last little bit and we get 53,191 and 6/10 inches cubed. Okay? And it's cubed because we're doing volume and we're filling up the inside of the shape with cubes, and it takes this many cubes to fill up the inside of the cylinder. All right, so let's look at our next problem. The first thing we have to do is we're going to look at this cylinder and we're going to say they give us the diameter. How do we find the radius? Because we need the radius. Well, the diameter cut in half is the radius. So if the diameter is 32 feet, the radius is 16 feet. Don't forget, you always need to find that radius. So now we just plug it into the formula. Pi is 3.14. Radius is 16 squared. And the height is 33. So we do our squared. So rewrite it, 3.14 times 256 times 33, and then we just go about our business multiplying. 803 and 84 hundredths times 33. Please don't forget to put your parentheses in between or a dot in between. Do not use an x because an x is a variable now. And then we do our very last bit of multiplying. So 26,526 and 72 hundredths feet cubed. This is probably the easiest formula because there's no fractions involved. So cylinders should be no problem at all. You just plug everything into the formula. All right, so the volume of a cone. The volume of a cone is 1/3 times pi times the radius squared times the height. If you'll notice, this formula is almost exactly the same as for a cylinder, only it's cut in thirds, okay? So the formula is the same as a cylinder, and then we divide it by 3. Multiplying by 1/3 is the same as dividing by 3. So let's look at our first problem. Okay. The cone has a radius of 24 and a height of 50. So let's just plug it in. 1/3 times 3.14 times 24 squared times 50. Now we're just going to go about this pretty much the same way. The only difference is I'm going to leave the divide by 3 or the multiply by 1/3 for the very end. So I'm going to square first. 24 squared is 576, and then I'm going to drop everything else down. Sorry, I'm going to move this up just a little so it's easier to read. Now, I'm going to start right here and multiply. I'm going to leave the 1/3, like I said, till the very end. 1,808 and 64 hundredths times 50. So 1/3 times 90,432. And then I'm either going to multiply by 1/3 or divide by 3. They mean the same thing. Okay, if you don't like to multiply by 1/3, then just divide your answer by 3. And so when I finish, my answer is 30,144 feet cubed. Let's try one more. We're plugging everything in. 1/3 times 3.14 times 3 squared times 11. Okay, 3 squared. So 1/3 times 3.14 times 9 times 11. Okay, so 3.14 times 9 is 28 and 26 hundredths times 11. Don't forget your 1/3. So then multiply those together and you get 1/3 times 310 and 86 hundredths. Then divide it by 3 and you get 103 and 62 hundredths meters cubed. I hope what you're seeing is that if you just plug into the formula, you can answer the question. All right, now let's talk about the volume of a sphere. Do not panic about this 4/3. I'm going to show you how to do it quick and easy, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to plug everything into our formula. Let's look at this sphere. Our radius is 6, and it's 4/3 times pi times radius cubed. That's different. Remember, radius cubed is the number times itself 3 times. So let's plug it in. 4/3 times pi, which is 3.14, times 6 cubed. 6 times 6 times 6, that's what we're doing first, is 216 times 3.14 times 4/3. 3.14 times 216 is 678 and 24 hundredths times 4/3. Now again, do not panic. Go back to what you know about fractions. I can multiply this because this is over a 1, okay? I can multiply the top number, my numerators together, and then divide by 3. When I multiply 678 and 24 hundredths by 4, and then I divide it by 3, I get 904 and 32 hundredths meters cubed. Multiply by 4, divide by 3. I'm going to write that up here. Multiply by 4, divide by 3. That's how I do it all the time instead of trying to do my fractions, and actually turning 4/3 into a decimal doesn't help you because it's a repeating decimal. So multiply by 4, divide by 3. Now let's try the volume of this sphere right here. Well, we know that its diameter is 30, so we have to find its radius. Half of 30 is 15, so the radius is 15. All right, so let's plug it in. 4/3 times pi times 15 cubed. Okay, 4/3 times 3.14. 15 cubed is 3,375. Multiply that by 3.14 and you get 10,597 and 5/10 times 4/3, which means multiply 10,597 and 5/10 times 4, divide it by 3, and your answer is 14,130 inches cubed. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Okay, one more quick step that you might find on the math test or anywhere else is when you're looking at the volume of a shape, sometimes they're going to ask you to leave it in terms of pi. Here's what that means. You're not going to multiply everything by 3.14. Your answer is going to be in terms of pi, meaning you leave that symbol in there because everybody understands that that symbol is 3.14. Let me show you what I mean. Let's look at the cone. If I go back and look, I know that my formula for the cone, for finding the volume of a cone, is 1/3 times pi times radius squared times height. I'm going to plug everything in except the number for 3.14. So here's what it would look like. 1/3 times pi times 3 squared times 7. Now I'm going to solve it the same, except I'm going to leave the pi alone. So 3 times 3 is 9 times 7 times pi times 1/3. 9 times 7 is 63, so I have 1/3 times pi times 63. Remember, I'm going to leave the pi alone, so I'm going to multiply the 1/3 times 63, or 63 divided by 3, and I get 21 pi inches cubed. That is leaving this in terms of pi. That means I just didn't multiply by 3.14. This is actually a much more accurate number than when I multiply by 3.14 because pi is so many more numbers. Remember, it's irrational and it never ends. So when I cut it off at 3.14, it's not near as accurate as it should be. So let's try doing this sphere and leaving it in terms of pi. So the formula for a sphere, for the volume of a sphere, is 4/3 times pi times r cubed. Okay, so my radius is 12. So I have 4/3 times pi, remember I'm leaving pi alone, times 12 cubed. 12 cubed is 1,728. And I'm going to leave the pi on the outside here so I get it out of my way, times 4/3. So 4 times 1,728 is 6912 divided by 3. I'm leaving the pi by itself. And then when I finish this up, I get 2,304 pi meters cubed. All right, I know this is a long video. Volume of 3 different kinds of shapes with 3 different formulas takes a long time. Please make sure you write down any questions you might have, and we'll be doing this more during class. All you have to do is plug in the information you know and solve it to find the volume of a cone, cylinder, or sphere.